kind of phone you probably haven't heard of beat Samsung at its own game? Honor is gunning for the Galaxy S24 Ultra with its latest flagship, the Magic 6 Pro. It's been on perma-discount pretty much since it launched earlier in the spring. And in the UK that means it's £400 or around $500 less than the S24 Ultra for a phone that, on paper, is just as impressive and even beats Samsung in some places, with more storage, larger camera sensors, faster charging, and a bigger battery. So can you get Ultra specs and Ultra performance without paying the Ultra price? I've been using these two phones on and off for the past 4 months now, and I've got thoughts on everything from software to cameras and of course the new AI features. I'm Alex Dobie, this is Pocket Now, let's jump in. So just externally, these two phones could not be more different. The Galaxy S24 Ultra is a titanium monolith with an aggressively angular design, chunky proportions, and an unapologetically enormous display that honestly likely won't be the most comfortable phone you've ever held. The Magic 6 Pro has a big screen too, just 1/10 of an inch less than the Galaxy on the diagonal, but for a variety of reasons it's much more ergonomic. The rounded frame, curved display, and gently sloping polycarbonate back panel, at least in the green model I'm using, make for an easier hand feel. That's in addition to being ever so slightly lighter as well. The curved display of the Magic is in some ways a throwback to what Samsung's flagships used to look like, with fairly pronounced edges here that blend cleanly into the chamfers of the outer frame. In terms of looks, I'm really not the biggest fan of the Magic 6 Pro though, mainly because of the choice of colours this year. You've got plain old black glass, or this more ostentatious soft touch plastic in green with a gold trim that just seems to be trying a little bit too hard in my opinion. I much prefer the look of the S24 Ultra visually. Although it's a bit dull, it's not as shouty and over the top as Honor's design. That said, I do prefer the ergonomics of the Honor phone. It's just way less slippery in the hand, especially when reaching across the width of the display. The plastic provides a grippier surface that makes it easier to wrangle with one hand. The displays are both excellent with 120Hz refresh rates and ludicrously high peak brightness levels. Honor has a Full HD Plus panel while Samsung opts for Quad HD Plus, but that's set to Full HD by default anyway. Aside from the resolution or peak brightness or even the fact that one curves around the sides, what I really noticed here was the S24 Ultra's anti-reflective finish. That's something the Honor phone lacks, and you can really see it under certain kinds of lighting. Darker areas on Samsung's screen just have a pitch black quality to them that other phones simply can't match. While we're talking displays, it's worth pointing out the Magic Capsule over here on the Honor side. It's Honor's recreation of the same feature from the iPhone, which faithfully replicates much of that functionality. And yeah, it's exactly as much of a copycat as it looks like. It's more compact than the same cutout on Apple's phones, but still more of an imposition than the basic hole punch in Samsung's display. The larger array of front cameras does enable some unique gesture features though, like the fun grab shot screenshot gesture that I loved from older Huawei phones. And then there are the various eyeball tracking features for interacting with notifications. I got to play with an early version of this at Mobile World Congress in March, but unfortunately it still hasn't rolled out outside of China. No such gesture wizardry on the Galaxy side, but Samsung does have its excellent ultrasonic fingerprint tech, which can scan your fingerprint to unlock without needing to illuminate the display, so it's less distracting to use in the dark. And of course there's the S Pen siloed inside the S24 Ultra, which has its own remote control capabilities in the camera and some other apps. Both phones run Qualcomm's latest Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 chip, the state-of-the-art in the Android world, and as such synthetic benchmark scores are broadly the same. But the rest of the spec sheet is kinda all over the map. Both pack 12 gigs of RAM, but Honor offers more storage as standard. The 512GB S24 Ultra is an additional upsell. The battery is a whole 12% larger, charging speeds are markedly faster too on the Honor side, whether wirelessly or over a wire. The 80-watt wired charging speeds of the Honor phone are noticeably quicker than Samsung's 45 watts, though with both phones you'll need to fork out additional cash for a charger that can supply sufficient juice since there's none provided in the box. That difference in charging speed isn't a huge deal considering both devices have excellent battery life, but it's just nice to have that extra option if, for example, you forget to charge it overnight. As much as I've talked up Honor's spec lead here, I do think it's worth pointing out the larger capacity cell doesn't necessarily lead to a 12% improvement in battery life. Say what you want about artificial benchmarks, but in real-world use these are both equally excellent, easily in the top tier of smartphone longevity. Alright, so software is really where the rubber hits the road with these two phones. Both have somewhat of a focus on AI, but otherwise have very different approaches to their individual flavors of Android. Samsung's One UI has been around for years, and the latest version 6.1, based on Android 14, includes all the excellent productivity and multitasking features we've come to expect. The Samsung DeX desktop mode is a genuinely helpful way to turn your phone into a basic computer over a cable or even wirelessly. The S Pen, of course, brings an array of helpful additions, including inline translation for a variety of languages just by hovering over the text, tight integration with Samsung Notes, of course, including quickly jotting stuff down from the display when it's in sleep mode, and various ways to capture content on your screen a little bit more easily. The big new addition for Samsung this generation is Galaxy AI, a sort of catch-all name for a variety of new features built around artificial intelligence. On the imaging side, Samsung Gallery can slow down video in real time thanks to some smart frame interpolating magic, and it's also been upgraded with new generative AI features like scene expansion and subject moving, similar to what you'll find in Magic Editor on a Google Pixel. Elsewhere, you've got Samsung's suite of translation features, which range from generally useful to hit and miss. In particular, the conversation translation works okay for basic interactions, but doesn't always use context clues to figure out the best translation. And the Samsung Notes and Recorder apps can summarize your notes and meeting recordings, which could be a neat time saver depending on who you are and how you work. Honor's Magic OS also brings something of an AI focus in its latest version 8.0. The Magic Portal feature allows you to grab media from various apps, and depending on the context and the kind of media it is and the apps you have installed, you'll be able to instantly share it with those other apps. It works pretty well with text wherever you can select it, or in images in most but not all apps. Magic Ring can help you share, interact with, and control other Honor devices if you have them. And we already mentioned the Magic Capsule feature here, aka Dynamic Island, which is supposed to allow you to control notifications using just your eyes. That still hasn't rolled out onto the global version of the phone, but I was reasonably impressed with it when I demoed it on the Chinese model. The other thing to talk about with Honor's software is the general look, feel, and performance, because through some small changes and some bigger improvements, the responsiveness, look, and feel of that UI has improved quite a bit compared to the previous version. There are definitely some nits to be picked here and there. I'm not a fan of how the one-handed mode works, for instance, with this awkward half-swipe gesture, and there's still way more iOS influence here in the design, really, compared to original DNA from Honor. But what's there generally looks decent and is fast and smooth to operate, definitely an improvement on earlier versions. Honor's AI focus also extends to its camera experience, but before we get into that, it's worth contrasting the actual camera hardware. Both phones pack similarly sized primary sensors, though at different resolutions, a whopping 200 megapixels for Samsung, 50 for Honor. Honor, however, augments its 1/1.28-inch main sensor with a super bright variable aperture that can open up as wide as f/1.4. It's also a variable aperture, so in brighter conditions it can automatically go down to f2 for a slightly sharper focus. That f/1.4 lens, though, helps you capture some shots with really nice natural bokeh in certain conditions, such as in portraits here without the need to use any software trickery. Samsung, of course, has excellent portrait modes that work with the primary or telephotos, and I was impressed by Honor's portrait performance too when shooting in that particular mode. But there's something just a bit crisper that you get about the sharp edges and natural bokeh with real optical depth effects, and that's a definite plus for the Honor camera. Honor also boasts its motion sensing capture feature, which can use AI object recognition to adjust ISO and shutter speed to capture fast moving pets, kids, or people jumping, or even automatically shoot when these things are detected. It works reasonably well, but Samsung also has made improvements in capturing moving subjects this generation, so with both phones your mileage may vary. Really though, the biggest difference I noticed between the primary and ultra-wide cameras here was the color balance. Even in its default color mode, Honor tended towards slightly more saturated hues and somewhat warmer tones in most daylight conditions. The field of view from the main camera was also slightly narrower in the Honor phone, and ultra-wide wise I think Honor has a slight but noticeable advantage with wider captures, as you'll see here with this wider field of view. And we'll see some similar differences when we get to talking about zoom photography, because generally Honor's zoom shots are slightly tighter as well compared to Samsung's at equivalent zoom levels. Otherwise, both phones are very much equally capable when you're shooting with either the primary or the ultra-wide, with very little in it between them, even in much darker conditions using night mode. Once again, the only real difference I noticed under warmer indoor lights and street lights was a bit more saturation and warmer colors on the Honor side. Telephoto is where you really start to see some serious differences between these cameras though. Samsung has two telephotos of course, a 3x and a 5x, with the 5x boasting a larger 48 megapixel sensor this year. But Honor makes a much more interesting and arguably more bold hardware choice. Its single telephoto packs a mere 2.5x zoom level, which in reality is about equivalent to the framing of a 3x shot on the Samsung side, but with a larger 180 megapixel sensor and a bright f/2.6 aperture. That means the way these telephotos work is very different, and as such the photos you'll get can vary quite a lot. At 3x I found myself preferring the output of the Honor telephoto, which seemed to have a bit more depth and fine detail to them compared to the flatter looking 10 megapixel shots from the Galaxy. That's just what you get from a larger, higher res sensor, I guess. The differences were much more subtle once you zoom into 5x though, and that larger 48 megapixel Samsung sensor comes into play, with aforementioned color differences being noticeable of course, as well as the differences in relative zoom levels. Once again though, I think we're dealing with a pretty close contest here at 5x. But it's only really when you zoom past 10x that you start to see the benefit of Samsung's 5x lens setup. As the Honor camera reaches longer zoom levels, it starts to lean more on AI post-processing guesswork much more, and in particular you can see this in areas with text. A great example is this globe here, where Honor really chews up the country and city labels. Samsung's shot is slightly noisier at these longer ranges, but I'd argue more accurate and true to life. That said, the combination of the larger sensor size and the 2.5x zoom level produces a really nice level of natural bokeh that also translates across really well to video. I've shot a bunch of B-roll for various other Pocket Now and XDA videos using this camera, and the footage looks great alongside clips from the Panasonic GH6 I'm using the rest of the time. And footage from the main camera and ultra-wide also didn't disappoint, with ample dynamic range and reliable stabilization when shooting at a brisk walking pace. Aside from a few color differences, mainly slightly more vibrant output from the Honor camera, the most noticeable differences were slightly more sharpening in areas of fine detail from the Samsung camera and a bit more visible HDR haloing going on in output from the Honor. Longer zoom shots also definitely look a little bit better on the Samsung camera just because you're starting from a base 5x zoom level as opposed to 2.5. So considering the price difference here, you've got to ask yourself, are you getting more bang for your buck with the Magic 6 Pro? Well, in many ways, yes. The specs and performance are excellent, and Honor has come a long way with its camera capabilities too. Samsung's lead is mostly limited to longer range zoom shots, which probably won't be a massive deal to most people, and depending on how you shoot, having that larger telephoto sensor, even if it is behind a shorter range zoom level, might actually be an advantage. But you've also got to consider the many unique features that only Samsung can offer. That superb reflection cancelling display, for example, and the impressive Samsung value adds on the software side like DeX mode and the many AI photo capabilities. None of those are deal breakers themselves, but considered together, they are a compelling reason to pay more for the S24. Samsung also offers a longer software support lifespan and has typically done a much better job of pushing those updates out in a timely manner. Last year's Honor flagship only got Android 14 in late March 2024 versus October 2023 for the S23 series. Even if you're not keeping your phone for 7 years, that longer lifespan should help it retain more value over time, so you spend less eventually when it comes time to replace it. So I think the Honor Magic 6 Pro is an excellent buy, especially considering its perpetually discounted price. But given the choice here, I would still go with Samsung. My pick, even at the higher price, would be the S24 Ultra. It mainly comes down to the better telephoto performance, that fantastic display, a better update track record, and a better chance of getting more money back when it's time to move on. So that's it for now. Let us know down in the comments which of this pair you would pick. Stick around and subscribe for more comparisons coming very soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.